I'm with the Reverend Chris Wickland, the vexed Vicar. Now, Great Britain has a great heritage when it comes to Israel, with the Balfour Declarations and many Christians writing that document. But today, the Church of England seems to be turning their back on Israel. Would you agree with that?
I'm afraid I have to go along with that, yeah, and say that I do believe the Church of England are turning its back on Israel. We've seen this really since October the 7th, just a complete complicit silence on behalf of the church to call anything out. And all it seems to be doing all the time is taking one side of the whole war. It's all, everyone pray for Palestine, the poor Palestinians, nothing about the attack on the Israelis by Hamas or anything like that. So it's very much a one-sided aspect. And now with this reading of the Kairos 2 Palestinian document, again, we're seeing kowtowing to just purely a one-sided narrative.
Mm. Does the Church of England actually understand that Israel is actually fighting terrorists, and terrorists don't actually play by the rules?
I would love to actually ask some of these people to their face what they actually think on that point, because they're either so indoctrinated that they just can't see the truth, or they just don't want to see the truth, because the reality is that they just hate Israel. Um, there is a problem here in Britain with replacement theology. It's infested everything. And so the church, for the most part, I'd probably say 70%, that's 70% of the church here in Britain is anti-Jewish in that respect, that it is replacement in its theology, does not think that Israel has anything to do with anything. And then yet they read in their own Bibles that when Jesus returns, he's coming back to Israel. There's all, I just don't understand why people can't see it. You read Romans chapters 9, 10, 11. It's so clear that God has a place for Israel, and it's important. You read the early covenants with the Abrahamic covenant, and again, Israel will be given a piece of land that will be theirs forever. I just don't understand how so many Christians just turn a blind eye to such a momentous subject, especially as we said off camera, we're heading towards the end of days. Israel becomes the very central pivot stone, if you like, upon which everything revolves around. And if you don't get Israel, you don't get anything.
How deep is replacement theology in the Church of England?
The nature of the Church of England, unfortunately, it's very much very deeply bound within it. Now, during parts of previous history, you had people like in the Clapham sects that essentially started coming to this understanding that actually, there is a plan for Israel, and so that's really where kind of Christian Zionism kind of really started to grow here in the UK. And that was about 150 years ago. So, but predominantly, the Church of England is covenantal in its theology, which means that it is replacement and sees nothing to do with Israel. And the fact that Israel there is just a coincidence. But let's take that argument, right? Even if that were true, right, which it isn't, but even if that were true, as Christians, you still can't take a one-sided only argument on this. So it actually, they're using their theology to justify and to mask their actual anti-Semitism.
Is Christian Zionism a dirty word now in the UK? And is it a way of actually being anti-Semitic, but by saying it's Christian Zion, or not just Christian Zionism, but being a Zionist in general?
Yeah, so the left weaponize Zionism as a form of Nazism, which is a complete oxymoronic thing to say. It's like that's just ridiculous. But yeah, there are a lot of Christians, a lot of churches. If you're kind of even vaguely pro-Israel, it's like, oh, you're a Zionist, and it's all. But you and I know that the term Zionist, all it means is that the Jews have a right to determine a homeland for themselves and their own state. Why is that okay for everybody else on the planet, but not Israel? Why, and when we see so much in the scriptures that point to the fact that, Israel will become a nation again in one day and all the prophecies and stuff, I just don't understand why Christians won't see it and don't see it. But in answer to your question, Christian Zionism is a dirty word here in the UK, but we just wear it as a badge of honor because it's true. We believe biblically that the Jews have a right to determine their own state and their own homeland, which is in the land of Israel.
Mm. Now, if you support replacement theology, are you more likely to be pro-Palestinian rather than, the biblical call that says in the book of Genesis, "I will give you this land as an eternal covenant"?
Yeah, no, definitely. it seems to be that if you are replacement in your theology, I wouldn't say it's true for everyone, so we've got to be careful of that. But I would generally say that if you're replacement in your theology, you're already well on the way to an anti-Semitic worldview because you just don't see the Jews as being relevant. You've replaced them, and therefore they mean nothing. Which is just a terrible thing to say, or even to think. It's like, well, how come every other people group in the world don't get replaced and wiped off the proverbial theological map just because you think they do? Yeah, so I do think that if you go down that road, you instinctively end up disliking Israel.
Do you think the church hasn't actually learned anything? Because we know that people like Martin Luther, for instance, he was very anti Semitic in some of his writings, which even Hitler used. And today we seem to be going down the same route again.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it was in the days of Bonhoeffer in Germany. He warned the churches about the rise of anti-Semitism and the rise of hatred to the Jewish people, but they just, for the most part, they chose to turn a blind eye to it, and the church, ironically, became politicized, and they allowed the state to do terrible crimes against the Jewish people and just pretended that it wasn't going on. And we're seeing exactly the same thing now. When October the 7th happened here in the UK, the silence that came from the church was deafening. They just wouldn't speak up, wouldn't talk about it. You know, even if you didn't agree with Israel theologically or politically, what happened on October the 7th was an abomination. It was a pogrom against Israel. It was one of the worst atrocities against the Jewish people in modern times. The fact that the church stayed silent on that particular issue is.
Oh, you just paused for a second then.
Uh,
You
yeah,
said is, what did you say, is deafening? Or
yeah, sorry. So the
just say
fact that the
that
church,
again, then I can edit it in. So
yeah, sure.
just
Yeah,
say
no,
it's deafening, basically. Like, 'cause
yeah. So when October the 7th happened, the lack of response from the church was deafening. And it was really shocking that one of the greatest pogroms, the worst pogrom, sorry, that's happened in modern history was just completely ignored for the most part by the church.
now, how damaging is this to Jewish Christian relationships?
Well, the thing is here in the UK is there is a lot of good Christian Jewish relations amongst various organizations. So on one sense that hasn't changed. The downside is that it's always the same faces. You know, if you go to, I'm not being rude, but if you go to the pro-Israel events, you're going to meet the same people that you met last year and the year before and the year before. And that's concerning because we need to be winning hearts and minds to understanding the truth of what's going out there. So I don't think it's going to hurt anything initially, but the trouble is with the Church of England, they hold a lot of political clout, and that puts pressure on our politicians to put pressure on Israel and or on the United Nations, and that is bad for Christian Jewish relations.
The Church of England has adopted the Kairos II declaration. Are they just following the pro-Palestine mob on the streets of London with this hate, with their hate banners? What is this Kairos II? What does it mean to the Church of England?
Well, the Kairos 2 document, the trouble is with it is, as you know, it only basically gives one side of the argument. It's basically a constant criticism that the conflict is that the conflict with the Middle East, as in Gaza, is exclusively just through one moral lens, and it's just all anti-Israel all the way through. And the fact that the Church of England has wanted to go along with this, again, we're seeing here in the Church of England, the Church of England has basically endorsing same-sex blessings of marriages. They have practicing gay clergy within the Church of England. It's quite often that they endorse pride events. So as a church, I would personally say that the Church of England is now pretty much apostate. And so for them to go along with this pro-Palestinian narrative, it almost seems kind of like where they have to go really because they are so bought into the Marxist cultural narrative now over here in the West that they just seem to have bought it. You know, they tell people off like me for being political, yet they're the ones that are being politicized, and actually they're the ones that are being political because they're pushing through one narrative. Whereas people like myself, we are speaking against the politics of the day by standing up for scripture and righteousness.
And of course, the Bible does say about, once you listen to one man's story, it seems right, and then you listen to someone else's story, and of course, and then you can judge something. So if they're only just hearing one side of the story, they're going to be very, very biased indeed, aren't they? And it's not even biblical to do that.
No, it's right. The Torah teaches that on account of two or three witnesses, whereas this whole document is just completely one-sided. It's all about the Jews that are guilty of what's the word? Colonizing, colonialism, guilty of genocide. All of these accusations, which are not actually borne out in actual reality. There's people that have looked into this and have said Israel is not guilty of committing a genocide. And it's all this kind of one-sided narrative. I often say to these people that say, oh, Israel or this, that, and the other. I said, have you ever been to Israel? No, and I never want to go. And I said, well, maybe you should go because it's probably one of the most cosmopolitan places I know in the world. You've got Christians, you've got Jews, you've got Druze, you've got Arabs. They're all living together in Israel. It's no apartheid state, none of this rubbish. It's actually quite an amazing place to be and to see the complexities of all the religions and stuff that are going on in Israel. It's a wonderful place how they work that out. But people here in the West don't see it and they don't want to see it either.
Have you been to Israel, and have you actually been to both sides, where you've been to the Israeli side and also been to the Palestinian side? And what do you think of the Holy Land?
So I've been to Israel quite a few times. I haven't actually been to Gaza. Although I would like to say this point as well on all of this issue is people forget things. And what they forget is Israel gave them the Gaza Strip, which is what they call Palestine, amongst other parts. And, people forget that. And the reason why Israel had to do what it did to defend itself is because then this Gaza Strip, basically all the money that was pumped into there to make it into this haven city of paradise, if you like, in the Middle East, just ended up all that money was funded into terror tunnels and into terrorism. And so Israel had an obligation to defend itself. So I've been to Israel many times, and I think it's a beautiful country. I love it. And as I said, it's one of the most cosmopolitan places in the world. It's not apartheid. And anyone that says apartheid are just basically don't know what they're talking about.
Now, the Archbishop of Canterbury was in Israel, and she met mostly the Palestinian side. And now we have the Kairos 2 document. Is this worrying for you that this has just been adopted? And how did this get adopted? Did they vote this into power? So is this different clergymen voting this into power? So that's the heart of the real beating of the heart of the church.
Yeah, the actual heartbeat, the heartbeat of the church comes, I would say, from the people on the grounds, like the priests and all that. But a lot of them don't agree with this, but it's the Archbishop of Canterbury, Sarah Mullally, and the bishops that they're basically all, for the most part, behind this. It's the same with the whole same-sex blessing thing that went on a few years ago. Most of the people in the synod on the ground level were like, we don't want this, but the bishops pushed it through anyway. And that's where it seems to be coming from. It seems to be coming from the top and they're pushing it through, which is a travesty because they're just not listening to the will of the people. And I personally think that this is one of the very many death nails that the Church of England just hammered into its own lid. And I do think this is not going to bode well for the future of the Church of England.
Do you think they've cursed themselves when you read about "I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you"? Do you think now there really is a curse on the Church of England?
Yeah, well, I mean, you take the last Archbishop, he came out with a big statement that was all pro-Palestine and very anti-Israel. Within 3 months, he was out. And so I do think this is a very worrying direction that the Church of England has gone in. But I think that all of these things, in many respects, need to come to head. There's a lot of people waking up to the realization that here in the UK, people are concluding now that the Church of England is, to all intents and purposes, an apostate church. And in answer to your question about the Genesis curse, a lot of Christians, they don't believe that. Oh, that's just Old Testament. It's like, no, it's the word of God. I've seen it time and time again throughout history with political leaders and various things. And I believe it's just as true today as it was the day that it was spoken. And a lot of Christians don't like that, but I've just seen it come to pass too many times. If you bless Israel, you're blessed. If you curse Israel, you are in big trouble.
We've seen, of course, within the last week in the UK, where we've had a real changeover of Prime Minister. Keir Starmer declared a Palestinian state without really any borders or anything, without explaining what that means. And he didn't even make it for 2 years, and now he's gone.
That's right.
There was a petition that went out with Pastor Regan King. How has that been accepted, and has many people signed that?
A big petition went out, and actually they got a really good response in the sense of people were not happy that this document is purely a one-sided document. It basically cuts off any Christians that are pro-Zionist. So a document that claims to be um, um, promoting unity across Christians, the fact that it just completely says if you have this opinion or this belief, you are not to be involved in we don't like you. You got nothing to do with this. And so there was a big backlash against it, and a big backlash against the Church of England on them reading that Kairos 2 document. So that in itself is positive, at least.
Mm. Do you think the stand that the Church of England are making at the moment will actually encourage anti-Semitism?
With respect, I don't think you need to encourage anti-Semitism here in Britain or across Europe. It's absolutely rife now here. It's at fever pitch, and it's just coming from the left all the time. They're always gaslighting people, saying that people on the right. So, for example, that drive-through terrorist attack that happened in Europe the last couple of days. They're blaming that on people like us, saying, politicians saying, if it wasn't for you guys spreading hate, this wouldn't have happened. And it's just like, so we're constantly being gaslit, and anti-Semitism here in the UK is at record highs. And it's being taught in our colleges, in our universities, it's in the political system, it's everywhere. And so unfortunately, what the Church of England is doing is, I don't think it's going to add to it. It's just another piece of wood on the fire as far as I'm concerned.
Does the Church of England need to come back to the book of Genesis, come back to the Bible, and are they actually fighting God?
But the Church of England, they need to take a good hard look at themselves, take a look at even at their own canon law, and then get back to the Bible real swiftly and just believe what the thing says. The trouble is with the Church of England, they only believe what they read. Sorry, they only read what they believe. They don't believe what they read, and they've got themselves into this mess. It's almost like we're coming to the time of the Reformation again, where the church had drifted so far away from biblical orthodoxy that it's going to take a massive reformation or some kind of movement to pull it back. But I think we're there now. I think the Church of England this is like, for me, the last nail in the coffin, so to speak.
Do you think this is actually biblical, that the churches are turning away from Israel? That
Yeah, well,
the Bible talks
yeah, I
about
mean,
this, doesn't it?
yeah, again, we're coming towards, it's very clear we're coming towards the end of days. Zechariah 12 says, that Israel will become the stumbling block of the world, and it is now. And at this time when we've got war with Iran, it's literally on the horizon, and with Russia and China, massive, big issues. And the Church of England is completely oblivious and completely blind to it. And as we know from scriptures as well, there'll be a great falling away at the end of days. And we know about the apostate church, a church that has a form of godliness but denies the power of it. And so, therefore, I believe that the Church of England is such a church. I believe that the Church of England is apostate now. And I believe the Church of England has abandoned its orthodoxy, has abandoned its own foundation, and has abandoned the true rock, which is Jesus Christ.
What is your prayer today for Israel and the Jewish people, particularly in the UK?
Yeah, my prayer really for the Jewish people is, I would really like them to feel safe here in Britain, but I meet more and more Jewish people that are now making Aliyah because, ironically, they feel the safest place in the world is to be surrounded by their enemies rather than to be in Britain or in Europe where they don't know where their enemies are. Could be anybody on the street. So my prayer would be that the Jewish people here in Britain could have a sense of peace and know that there are many Christians that stand with them. And there's a silent majority, I believe, here in Britain of British people that are very pro-Israel. Their voices are just drowned out by the far left. And so my prayer is that they won't have to make Aliyah and move away. But the reality is that a lot of them are because they don't feel safe here anymore, which is a real shame, a real travesty. But I would like to say to the Jewish community, there are lots of Christians here in Britain that have got your back. We support you. I was in the Lake District the other day, and I saw a Jewish couple there, and just went straight up to them and said, we support you, we support Israel. And he was so thankful, so grateful. He said it's so nice to actually hear someone who says that they get where we're coming from, because it's always just the one-sided argument that we're the demons, we're the evil ones, where it's not like that at all.
Mm. You have a YouTube channel and you commentate on various things in the news and what's happening in the UK. What's your YouTube channel for people who'd like to know more about the work that you do?
Yeah, so you can just my YouTube channel is just called Chris Wickland, Wickland, or just find it even quicker than that. Just type in vexed Vicar, Vexed, and then Vicar, and then it will come up with like lots of various programs and stuff. And I'm also on X at Rev Wickland as well.
Well, Reverend Christopher, thank you so much for sharing today.
It's a privilege. Thank you.